Welcome to OLC 4.0. It is term 2B. This is class 25. This is also assignment 35, looking at number 1 and number 2, and also looking at how to use that clause. It is May 29th, 2025, and this is Jillian Percy. Here are all the ways to contact us. The studio number is 1-800-465-7144. The office phone number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. I also have jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. That's the one that people use if they are sharing documents from Google Docs for me. I have the teacher Facebook, which is G Percy Wassa. If you are sending me a message there, let me know what course you are enrolled in and what your proper name is. And there are 2 different YouTube channels you can look at to watch the previous the recorded classes. The school channel is called Wassa Distance Education Center. That has all the courses from the school year on from all the different teachers. And then I have my teacher channel, which is just my stuff from this year and last year. The most current playlist would be term 2B for the OLC 40. That will not be on the school channel. The school channel only has term 1A. There is no significant difference between the two. We just didn't want to clutter up the channel with too many things at once, okay? All right, how to hand in assignments. There are so many different ways that you can hand in assignments. First of all, if you have a learning center in your community, the person who runs it, we call them a DEC, you can talk to them, get them to scan it, and then email it to me. When you do that, hang on to your originals. You can also fax it to me at 1-800-463-7852 if you're in Ontario, or 1-877-990-2023 if you are in the rest of Canada. You can email it to me with the assignment as an attachment, like if you did it in Word. Some people, as I said, share it with me through Google Docs. When you do that, make sure to include me as somebody who can view or edit it. I obviously will not edit your work. It just makes sure that I can see it. That's all it is. I really discourage people from mailing things. If you do, make sure you're mailing me the copies rather than the originals, because it's easy for things to get lost. And then a lot of people just take a photograph of their assignment and send it to me either through Facebook or email. If you do that, make sure the photograph is really clear and easy to read, and then send it as an attachment rather than cutting it, pasting it into the body of the email. The other thing is occasionally I have people will put the photograph on a page. If you do that, make sure it's the full size of the page. Don't try and stick 5 photographs on one page, because what happens is when I try to expand them, they don't have the same resolution as they had on your side, and I can't usually read the writing. The other thing you can do is you can download a scanner app and take pictures of the scanner. That works really well. It's designed a little bit more for documents rather than what photographs are, but it's not any harder than taking a photograph. Basically, you download it, then you open up the app, you position your phone over the document and take a picture. Adobe Scan has the little dots that kind of line up to the corners, and you can also play with the borders if you need to. Once you snap the picture, you can just keep on snapping pictures until you have all the pages done for that assignment. Hit continue. Now it will let you preview. You can reorder things or take a photo again if you're not happy with how the quality of it. Then you hit save PDF and give it a name. Generally, I name it by the course and the assignment number, because a lot of people take more than one course with us. And then save it wherever you save things, your Google Drive, your Dropbox, whatever you do, then send it to me in an email. Okay? We are currently in week 7 of this 9-week course. The last day we can accept assignments is June 12th. June 13th is reserved for handing in exams, and this course does not have an exam. Okay? This course has a long culminating activity instead that takes the place of an exam. It will take, I think, most people between about 5 to 10 hours, depending on how quickly you write. Some people like to do lots of versions and make sure it's perfect. Other people like to kind of race through as quickly as possible. I will suggest that you do not leave this to the last day, especially if you work full-time or if you're taking care of young children all day. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to only want to do like for an hour after supper. It'll take longer than that. If you plan to finish this course before the summertime, please ask me immediately for the culminating activity so you have plenty of time to work on it, because it is worth 20% of your overall grade, and it has a huge influence on how strong your grade is. If you are a potential grad for this June, I strongly recommend completing all assignments by tomorrow. If you think you're gonna have a hard time with that, contact me. We can work out what is best for you to do. It takes me a long time to do the marking and write the report card. I have 134 students in this course and over 200 total. There is no way I can complete everybody's marking in one day if everybody chooses to leave it to the end. If you are running so far behind your assignments that you're like, you know what, I'm not going to get this done, I need to enroll in summer school. Well, you are in luck, because this course does run through the summertime, and I will be doing the marking through the summertime as well. Now, there are no live courses, like no live classes during the summertime, but you just look at the same classes that have already been recorded. It won't change. It might change for September, but it won't change over the summertime, okay? And I will still be available to contact by email. I will not be in the office though. Basically, there are office staff, but the teachers are not normally here. I can arrange to meet somebody if somebody needed to meet up with me and do some work together. That's fine. So if you decide you want to do that, either contact me, contact the office, or you can go to our Facebook page, which is called WASA Distance Education Center new page, and there's a post about it. There's a little link for our registration. You'd click on the registration, fill it out, and send it in to us, okay? Any of those will work. Okay, moving on to our learning goals for today. First of all, write complete and correct sentences using appropriate grammar and usage while using a that clause, which I'll explain more in a minute. Construct summaries that clearly state the main idea and include important supporting details. Use the knowledge of how to write news reports to create narratives related to other subject areas and personal interests. Use appropriate punctuation correctly, especially quotation marks and other punctuation affected by quotation marks. Use your oral language skills to develop content for writing. Use pre-writing strategies to generate ideas for writing. And explain the purpose and uses of other nonfiction narrative forms, such as incident reports, recountings, biographies, or autobiographies. Okay, so we're going to work on, okay, I'm going to do the grammar at the end today, just to make sure I cover everything that has to get covered today. So we're looking at the other forms of nonfiction. These are ones that we haven't necessarily talked about in our course, but they still exist. Any kind of narrative is a story, basically. Narratives can be nonfiction, in other words, true, anecdotes people tell about their lives, recounting of events, biographies, news reports, or they can be fictional, in other words, imaginary, novels, short stories, that kind of thing. All of these formats tell stories in that they all use chronological order, they have distinct settings, they develop their characters, but they're organized a little bit different. It is important to be able to tell the difference between different types of narratives so that you can easily identify the sequence of events and the main ideas. Most narrative texts use dialogue or quotations to show what people are saying. So now I'm going to take a look at some of the different nonfiction and fictional narratives that you may or may not be familiar with that might be useful to you as we're getting ready to do our portfolio. Okay, anecdote. This is one of those words that sounds a lot like another word, which is antidote. An antidote is when you're trying to like heal somebody of like snake venom or something. An anecdote is more like a small story, often funny or interesting. It's usually based on a real incident involving real people, sometimes famous, sometimes not. It's not necessarily, it can be to make people laugh, but it's intended to reveal a truth, okay? Most make you think and learn something about yourself. There is a lot of dialogue in an anecdote. Some people would consider the legends and stories of the First Nations people anecdotes. So here is an example of that. Long ago, when the world was young, porcupines had no quills. One day, when Porcupine was in the woods, Bear came along and wanted to eat him. However, Porcupine climbed to the top of a tree and was safe. The next day, when Porcupine was under a hawthorn tree, he noticed how the thorns pricked him. He had an idea. He broke off some of the branches of the haythorns and put them on his back, and then he went into the woods and waited for Bear. When Bear sprang on Porcupine, the little animal just curled himself up into a ball. Bear had to go away, for the thorns pricked him very much. Nanebojo saw what happened, and he called Porcupine to him and asked, "How did you know that trick?" "I am always in danger when bears come along," replied Porcupine. "When I saw those thorns, I thought I would use them." So Nanebojo took some branches from the hawthorn tree and peeled off the back till they were white. Then he put some clay on the back of Porcupine, stuck the thorns in it, and made the hole a part of the skin. "Now go into the woods," said Nanebojo. Porcupine obeyed, and Nanebojo hid himself behind a tree. Soon Wolf came along. He sprang on Porcupine and then ran away howling. Bear came along, but he did not get near Porcupine. He was afraid of those thorns. And that is the story of why porcupines have quills today. Okay, recounting of events is a way of saying the story, but usually a truthful story. Like if somebody said, "Hey, tell me about what happened the other night at the concert," that kind of idea, right? It's usually a summary. I don't know. I would say more of a retell. I don't care for that. Anyways, biography is a story of somebody's life. It's often a famous person, but it doesn't have to be, right? We could write a biography about Joe Schmo down the street if we want to. An autobiography is when you write about your own life. So here's some sample words for biography. Chief Dan George was born as Geswanith Slalut in North Vancouver. His English name originally was Dan Slahot. His last name was changed to George when he entered a residential school at the age of 5. Okay, news report. We've read a few news reports. We've written a few. It's still considered a narrative, okay? Because it usually is still telling a story, even though it doesn't necessarily tell it exactly in order. Fictional narratives are generally designed to entertain. They may be just a few pages long or several hundred pages long. They almost always use dialogue or conversations as one part of it. Dialogue can show how characters think or feel, and it can add important information about a place, event, or another person. A short story is like a mini novel. They are much shorter than novels, and they follow the same format, right? There's still going to be characters, setting, and a plot. The thing is, they're not going to be as complicated as a novel. They may not have as many characters. They probably won't have subplots. If you're looking for examples of short stories written by First Nation students, you can go to www.ourstory.ca, Authors 09. That's the site of the Canadian Aboriginal Writing Challenge. You can get biographies on the writers as well as read their stories. It might even inspire you to submit a story of your own. This is a typical plot mountain that will apply to a lot of different narrative styles. The exposition, the beginning is usually like they introduce you to the setting and the characters. Then there's some sort of problem, okay? Something exciting happens. They're trying to solve a problem. Different obstacles get in the way. Usually this is where you find out what kind of conflict is happening. A bunch of obstacles will happen, and then the most exciting part of the story is called the climax. Like the big chase scene, the big fight scene, whatever it is, right? The big showdown. And then the action starts to get less exciting. Like things will begin to wrap up, things begin to get solved, and then the end or the resolution is however they choose to end the story. Okay, so we're going to talk in depth about quotation marks and using your oral language skills to develop your content, and also using what you understand about news reports to create other types of narratives, right? Quotation marks, I think, are probably one of the trickiest things to use as far as punctuation marks go. I think a lot of punctuation is pretty easy, but quotation marks, not so much. The big thing to notice is in typewriting, sorry, that sounds bad. In typewritten letters, you're going to see it look like this, right? They aren't exactly the same. When I was a kid, they thought of it as 66 in the front, 99 in the back. When it's handwritten, it would look like this. Now I've exaggerated mine, they're a little bit bigger, right? Make sure it's really obvious. Occasionally people will do something like, they'll just do like a little line. It's not really a line, okay? It should be a little tiny bit curvy, all right? So some of the rules. First, we use quotation marks to begin and end a direct quotation. Direct quotes are when the exact words that comes out of somebody's mouth. So my Gookum said, quote, I am going to the powwow, end quote, okay? I don't put the quotation marks in front of who's talking. I only put it in front of their exact words. Now, I don't use quotation marks if it's considered an indirect quotation. An indirect quote is when you're not quoting the person's exact words, you're just kind of summarizing. Like you had a whole long conversation with somebody and the net result is, she told me that she's not going to go to the powwow. She may have told you a whole long story, but you're not repeating everything. You're just summarizing. Another example would be, David said that was the best bannock and bologna sandwich he ever had. He may have said it slightly differently. That's my indirect quote. We often use a tag to explain who is speaking and how they are talking. For example, Jim said, the little boy cried, the teenager yelled. Sometimes you'll see them leave the tag off. Like if it's a conversation between two people and they're going back and forth, generally it can become kind of obvious who's talking and they might start to drop the tag. But if there's any possible way that your reader is going to get confused, then you should include the tag. So if the tag comes before the quotation, you put a comma right before the quotation starts. So for example, Becky said, comma, I am so glad to be home. If the tag comes after the quotation, then no comma is needed at the end of the tag. You would just usually use a period. I am so glad to be home, Becky said. If the tag is in the middle of two quotes from the same speaker, then you do still use the comma because it's thought of as continuing the sentence rather than ending the sentence. I am so glad to be home, Becky said, comma, it was a terrible day at work. The first word inside the quotation mark is capitalized as long as it's the beginning of the sentence for the speaker. Number 5, both parts of a divided quotation get enclosed in quotation marks. The first word of the second part does not get capitals unless it begins a new sentence. So in number 4, it began a new sentence, so we did put a capital. But here in number 5, we cut the sentence in half. The soup, the elder said, tastes just like my Gookums. So taste is the middle of a sentence, so we don't put a big capital. Now, I've usually seen it as ... so that it's obvious that it's not the beginning of a sentence, but I have seen it with just the lowercase. Number 6, when the quotation comes at the beginning of the sentence and should end in a period, we change it to a comma to make it clear the sentence isn't done. Otherwise, it looks like two really weird short sentences. So if it said, I am so sleepy, and normally we put a period there, it would look like, I am so sleepy, period, said the dad, period. It looks weird, so we change that period to a comma to show that the sentence is still continuing. Only if it's a period. If it's an exclamation point or a question mark, we keep them because they're not as confusing. So if I had help, yelled the little girl, I don't need a comma, I just keep the exclamation point. Are you crazy? Question mark, John asked. I don't need a comma as well, I just leave my quotation. My question mark, sorry. 7a, when the end of the quotation is also the very end of the sentence, the period falls inside the quotation marks. He said, we'll get into the supper line now. It's doing double duty. It's ending his talking. It's also ending the sentence. Sometimes people will like add another period there, but you don't need it. It's doing, the first one is enough. Usually this is true for question mark and exclamation points too, as long as the sentence punctuation and the quote punctuation are considered the same. So she asked, "Are you crazy?" And I don't need to put another period after that. We just leave that as a question. He yelled, "Stop it." And I've got an exclamation point, and again, I just leave it. Every now and again, you will see where there's one type of one type of punctuation mark inside the quotes and a different one outside of the quotes, okay? Is it true that he yelled no? So he is yelling, so I've got an exclamation point, but I'm asking a question, so I've got that there. Now, I would say generally, that is so confusing that if I were the writer, I would not write it. I would rewrite that sentence in a way so it's not as confusing. But if you were to leave it, that is how you would write it. When you write dialogue, you always begin a new paragraph whenever the speaker changes, okay? So here, "Sit down," the teacher said. "Let's talk. Are you going to do this every day?" Now somebody new is talking. "What?" he asked. She glared at him. "What do you mean, what?" He said nothing. He knew it was his best defense. Now, this, if I wanted to, I could have left it as part of that first paragraph because he's not saying anything. But I still kind of felt like it would be confusing. So I switched it to a new paragraph. Okay. Now, these next ones are super picky. And I don't think you're going to use them very often, but they're there just in case you need to know. When you are writing only a small part of a sentence that you're trying to quote, for example, if you're doing a research essay, don't put a capital letter on that quote unless it was already capitalized because it was the beginning of a sentence or the beginning of a name. So here it says, Robert Checkwich admitted he had not found many novels that were based in First Nation communities. I want to point out, I also didn't put a comma here because I'm not really introducing it. I'm more using that quote to finish the sentence. And then every now and again, you'll get this kind of weird quote within a quote where one character is talking and they're quoting someone else. So you use double quotes for the main quote and then like a single apostrophe for the inside quote. So double quotes. And then he said, single quote, "This is your last chance around here, Jimmy." Single quote, "What a jerk." Double quote, he said. Again, that is super tricky. I would be cautious about using it if you didn't have to. And then finally, if you cut somebody off in the middle of talking and you want to show that in your quotation, you generally use a pair of dashes. You'll use a dash at the end where you broke off his speech, and then you'll use a dash at the beginning where he starts talking again. So here it says, "First of all," he said, "if you can learn a simple trick, son, you'll get along better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view." End dash. Huh? So that guy interrupted him. He wasn't finished talking. So then he finishes talking. Beginning dash. "Until you walk 2 moons in his moccasins." Again, I myself would probably just write it differently because I think that's very fussy, but you're welcome to do it that way if you want to. Okay. So we started looking at this last yesterday, the day before, I think. So I just kind of wanted to remind you, assignment 35 has 3 parts. Okay, it's a big one. It's really important to do all the parts because it is a major, it's a major part of the marks for this unit. Okay. So exercise 1 is you go through the dialogue and you figure out where the punctuation marks are. Now this one says 6 marks. I think I've changed that to 14 marks because I felt like it was a lot of work for not enough marks. Okay. The dialogue hasn't changed. Okay. The thing is, they haven't just left off the quotation marks. They have also left off commas, periods, question marks, exclamation marks, and they left off capital letters sometimes. So you've got to really pay attention so you fix all those things or you won't get the full marks. Okay. I'm going to kind of read it And with my voice, I'm going to try and show you where I think punctuation is, if that makes sense. Because a lot of times where we pause kind of shows you where people are taking a comma. A longer pause is usually a period. So when you are punctuating this, I would find that if you read it out loud, you may find it helps you punctuate it. Okay. Hey, Kelly, Frank said. What's up? Hey, Frank. I'm just sitting around, hanging out, she replied. That's cool. Did you hear about what happened to Kara? He asked. No. What happened? She asked. Well, he said, I heard she got expelled. For what? She exclaimed. She brought in a knife or something like that, he replied. I bet somebody turned her in, Kelly said. Probably, Frank said. So, you got any plans for Friday? Yes, Kelly said. Why? Do you want to offer me something better? I don't know what you have planned, he said, but I was thinking about you and me getting together. And doing what exactly? Kelly asked. I don't know. We could hang out, Frank said. If you don't know, why did you ask? She asked. Try again when you think of something better to say. Okay, that's question one. So, like I said, many items are missing. Fix all the mistakes, not just punctuation marks. Quick reminders. The first word of a sentence or the first word of the dialogue both need to have a capital letter at the front. If there isn't one there already, change that lowercase letter to a capital letter. You do not need to put new quotes around every sentence a character says if they're saying 3 or 4 sentences in a row. So here, sometimes people will say this, quote, why, quote again, what are you mad about, he asked. But these 2 quotes in the middle aren't needed. He's just continuing to talk. Why? What are you mad about? And I just put a quote in front of the why and after the about. Okay, I don't need to double up because that gets very kind of ugly if somebody says a whole bunch of sentences. So we don't do that. Like we said before, not every single piece of dialogue is going to have tags. Sometimes you're going to need to use the context of the sentence to infer or make a reasonable guess about who's talking. Clean up your room, Dad yelled. I hate cleaning up my room. Okay, who is that? Well, I don't know, probably one of the kids. Remember that every sentence needs some sort of end punctuation. So occasionally you'll see this in that previous dialogue. You can't have nothing at the end. You've got to, at the very least, put a period. You could also consider a question mark or an exclamation point if it made sense. 99 times out of 100, I would say a period is the right choice, though. Remember that end punctuation comes inside the quote, and it usually is doing double duty by ending the quote and ending the sentence. I don't need to add an extra one there, okay? I will mark that wrong because it's not needed. All right, let's see here. Names still need to have a capital letter if they have forgotten. So it says, "You're grounded," Mr. Johnson yelled at his daughter, Rebecca. Okay, so first of all, "you're grounded." I put quotes, quote in front of the first part. Now, when it gets to Mr. Johnson yelled, that's him, that's his name, that's the tag. It doesn't need quotes. But I want to change the little m to a big M because Mr. is a title, it's kind of like a name, so we always have a capital. Johnson is the beginning of his name, so we change the little j to the big J. Yelled at his daughter, Rebecca. Rebecca is her name, so I need to change the little r to a big R. Make sense? Remember that the word I always needs to be a capital letter because it counts as a name. And it stays as a capital even when you use it inside contractions. Sometimes people will use I and they remember to use it as a capital when it's just I by itself. But then when they put it in contractions, they forget. Okay, but no, it stays as a capital. I'm, I'd, and I'll. You will need to fix this. So wait, I'm coming with you, Helen said. Okay, so in front of wait, I put my quotation marks. With you, I put my end quotes. I'm going to put an exclamation point because I picture her shouting. And then that little I gets turned into a big I. Okay. Also remember that any place names, street names, school names, names of months or day need to have a capital letter as their first letter. So Sue North with a capital S and a capital N, not lowercase. Monday with a capital M, not Monday with a lowercase. If you are handwriting instead of typing, please make sure that your capital letters are bigger, taller than your lowercase letters, especially if you don't follow the standard forms. Like, so for the standard form for a capital letter is the lowercase is curved and the uppercase is pointy. If you, sorry, this shouldn't have done that. If you keep them as curved, that's considered non-standard, in which case you have to make extra specially sure that that letter is big. So if you write it like this, mom was upset, I'm going to think that this is wrong because it doesn't look like a capital letter to me. You've got to make it nice and big like they've done here so that I know that you understand it's a capital. Same thing for W. I find it's another one that people do a lot. Make sure it's a big W if you're not following the standard form. Because the standard form is, sometimes you'll see a curvy form at the bottom, but then usually, oh, okay. It's weird. Okay, normally I've seen the capital W is pointy, just like the M. Oh, you know what? It's the font I'm using. Hang on. Let me just switch to Arial. That's one of those goofy things about typing here. Let me see. There you go. Okay, they've got them both as pointy. Okay. So we're gonna just do a practice one here. Well, yeah, real quick we will. We can just window shop said John. Okay, so said John is the tag, so I'm not going to need quotation marks about that. I need quotation marks around his talking. So opening quotes and then an end quotes. Right now, the W needs to become a big W, right? We can just window shop. That's not a question and it's not excited. It would be a period normally, but because it's a quote, it becomes comma. John also needs to be a capital. And then at the end of John, I put a period. Okay, I'm going to do one more and then I'm going to move on. Let's go down to the skateboard park instead, said Peter. We can go to the mall tomorrow when I get paid. Okay, so the tag is in the middle there. So he starts talking by saying let's. He stops talking when he says instead. Then we've got said Peter. And then he starts talking again. We can go to the mall when I get paid. Okay, so my quotation marks are in there, but now I got to fix everything else. The little L needs to become a big L for let's. Let's go down to the skateboard park instead. I'm just going to put a comma there because I don't think he's excited or asking a question. Peter needs to also become a capital. And then he's still talking, so I'm going to put a comma there to introduce the rest of the talking. And then I need some sort of punctuation here at the end. It's got to be inside the quote, and I'm just going to use a period. Okay. Now, assignment number 2 also uses quotes. For this one, I want you to write a page of dialogue between the 2 characters. You must give the 2 characters their names. The topic of discussion can be on any appropriate, school-appropriate topic, right? There are things you do not write in high school. I shouldn't have to spell that out. Some possible choices would include things like a job interview, a powwow, graduation day, being nervous about starting a new job, moving away, buying a new house. Your dialogue should reveal something about the character's feelings and their personality, not just giving information about the event. This can be based on a real life conversation that you've had, if that helps you start. It does not need to be word for word. Please feel free to add any more dialogue that you think will be appropriate. Here is the success criteria. Here's how I am marking this, okay? I am looking to make sure that your dialogue is at least 3/4 of a page long. I'm looking to make sure that you started a new paragraph every time the speaker changes. I'm looking to make sure that you use quotation marks around the speaker's words, that you've used tags to indicate who is speaking and how, that you have used end punctuation correctly, that you have used commas in place of periods inside a quotation, unless the quote is at the end of the sentence, and that your dialogue reveals interesting information about the character's feelings, personality, or the event. I'm saying this because occasionally I've had people hand in things like, hi, what's up? Nothing. What's up with you? Nothing. What you doing? Nothing. No, please don't, right? That's not good writing. Yes, it does show me that you know how to use quotation marks, but it doesn't show me that you know how to get people talking. That's what I'm looking for here, right? Yep, that's what you're saying. Dialogue can reveal a character's feelings. They can just state it, like my little sister said, I feel sad. Especially for grown-up writing, it can be more interesting when a character is describing actions or events, and you kind of have to infer how they're feeling from what they say and the tone they use to talk with. Mom said, I wake up every day. I don't even want to get out of bed. All I can think about is your father and how much I still wish he was here. When I do get up, I feel like there is a gray haze between myself and the rest of the world. No, I'm not doing okay, Jennifer. So from what she's saying, she feels a little bit sad, maybe a little bit depressed, maybe even a little bit angry, right? But she's not saying it right out. She's talking about what she thinks and feels inside it. Oh, I think I had eliminated this one point. The American Psychological Association defines personality as the enduring characteristics and behavior that drives a person's unique adjustment to life, including their major character traits, their interests, their drives, their values, their self-concept, their abilities, and their emotional patterns. So you can use dialogue to help convey a character's personality traits, what they're interested in, what they value, and even how they think about themselves. So here's an example. Mom said, we're having Gookum's birthday dinner at 6 o'clock. Don't be late because dad has to go to work at 8 o'clock. So we want to start right away. I told Dean I would go fishing with him later on. He was planning to stay out late today as it's first day off for a while, Tom told her. Well, you just have to tell Dean to drop you off at 6 or tell him you'll go another day. Gookum will be sad if you aren't there. So mom's words, what are they showing that she values? She values her mom. She values being on time. She values her husband's work schedule. Tom shows that he values his friendship with Dean, definitely more than being on time, maybe more than he values his Gookum. But he is showing that he values his mom's opinion. He doesn't just get mad and walk off. He explains why he's going to be late. And then with her mom's next words, she shows that she values her son obeying and respecting her values. And she's insisting that he place Gookum's feelings as a higher priority than Tom's feelings. So that's the kind of example of what I'm saying. When you're writing about something real, it kind of shows what people are. Okay? This is a really short list of personality traits. If you go online, there are like literally hundreds of these, from little tiny ones to really long ones. I'm not going to read it all. You can look at it just in case you're looking for ideas. Sometimes people get kind of stuck and they're like, I think of nice and mean, helpful, unhelpful, and then they kind of run out of ideas. This is just some more ideas, right? Dialogue can also reveal information about an event. You do want to make sure it sounds natural and not like a news bulletin. Here is how you might talk about an event and make it sound natural. Hey, are you still coming with us to the Thunder Bay Fair this weekend? I get off work at 5 o'clock on Friday. Come pick you up if you're still going, John asked David. Oh yeah, try leaving without me. I'll be chasing you down the road. The ticket price isn't so bad. I can find $20 easily enough. But all the money for the food vendors and the rides adds up quick. David added, Jessie's coming too because she wants to go on the rides. She keeps raving about the Ferris wheel we rode last year. I think the Ferris wheel is boring, but I love the zipper where you get tilted upside down. And I can't wait to see the fireworks. That's always my favorite part of the fair. I'm bringing a blanket so we can stake out a good spot this year up near the front, David explained. Okay. So choosing a topic, like this is the sign of things we've talked about. You want to make sure it's a big enough topic that there's something to say, right? Like talking about supper is probably going to be hard to do for an entire page, unless you are very skilled. Talking about bigger things kind of gives you more to say about it. You're going to need at least 2 characters. You could use more, but I really think sticking to 2 is easier, okay? Think about what their relationship is. It 2 friends, a husband and a wife, 2 common law partners, a boss and their worker, teacher and a student, doctor and a patient, parent and a child, 2 students, 2 strangers. Another thing to think about is, do they have the same level of power? Like, are they equals? Or is one person in charge of another one, right? Like a doctor kind of has more power than a patient in some ways. Parent has a little bit more power than a child. A boss has a little more power than an employee, because that can change how people talk to each other, right? You may want to just write everything down first and then go back and punctuate it. So for example, I'm gonna write down a conversation with my mom about moving away from home. Now, I was saying you can use a real conversation, but I wasn't in the room. It doesn't matter to me if what you wrote is exactly true. I'm just trying to use that as a basis for our ideas, right? Like real writers do that all the time. They have an interesting conversation with somebody and then they use it in their book. They don't necessarily stick to every single word. They feel free to change things to make it more interesting. And you can do that too, right? So if I said this, "Hey mom, can we talk?" I said. "Sure, honey, what do you want to talk about?" she asked. "Let's sit down," I said nervously. "Remember that job interview I had a couple of days ago? They have offered me the job." Now, some people find it easiest to, as they're writing, they just go along and they do their quotation marks. But other people find the quotation marks kind of confusing and they would rather do it at the end. I'm just pointing out it's your work. You can do it either way. As long as they're there when you finally hand it in to me, that's fine. Now, I will say, once or twice I've had students hand this in to me and they forgot to do any quotation marks. I will not mark it in that case because that is the key thing I'm looking for. So if you forget the quotation marks, I just kind of hand it back to you and say, "Oops, you forgot. Please redo it," and I will mark it when you fix that part, okay? Because it is the key thing I'm looking for. Okay. When you write down your ideas, go back through the dialogue, fix up any content first. Does it make sense? Is it interesting? Is it long enough? Should I fix anything? Once you're happy with the content, then you can go back and fix the punctuation if that's how you work, okay? Yep. Also, check for capital letters, check for the punctuation. Don't just worry about the quotes, okay? Yep. All right. I don't want to do that right now because I know I'm running a little short on time. So I'm going to talk about the that clause. If we don't quite get finished it today, I will finish it up tomorrow. I'll be doing a makeup class tomorrow at some point in time. I'm not sure what time of the day, but it will be there, okay? So the word that is kind of a tricky word, I've noticed. And the reason is because it is a word that can do a whole bunch of different jobs. And I think that gets people mixed up, okay? Sometimes it can be a demonstrative pronoun, and that's where it's referring to something else and it's kind of pointy, like that is a snake. And you'll see that at the beginning of a sentence a lot of times, right? Or sometimes it may be working as a determiner or a very special type of adjective, like my house is that gray one. Now, those two are very similar, okay? That is referring back to another word, like what's that green thing? Or what's that animal? Or what something, you know what I mean? And it's referring back to that. This one is, it's kind of inherent right in that sentence. So remember when we were talking about antecedents and pronouns the other day? Pronouns take the place of a noun, usually a noun that was written earlier, which we call an antecedent, okay? Jane was so angry, she broke a glass. So Jane is the antecedent, she is the pronoun. Now, for the word that, sometimes when you're using speech, the word that can be referring to an entire other sentence. Like your friend says, hey, let's have a barbecue on Saturday at the beach. And you say, that sounds wonderful. And you're not referring to just one thing, you're referring to that entire idea, that entire sentence. Okay. Another example is sometimes we use the phrase that's plus an adjective to respond to a statement somebody made. And again, the word that in that case is referring to that entire previous statement. My mom was just diagnosed with cancer. That's terrible. The that is referring to that entire statement. My daughter was just accepted into law school. That's wonderful. Again, it's not just referring to the daughter or just referring to the law school. It's referring to that entire sentence. And you'll see that kind of phraseology all the time. That's great. That's horrible. That's scary. That's awesome. Okay. Sometimes the word that is used as an intensifier, an adverb describing another word. So if somebody says, oh, she's a pretty girl, and you kind of disagree, you might say, she is not that pretty. And when you're saying that, it's kind of like a put down there. Like she's not really pretty, right? The teacher said that you were rude. I wasn't that rude, Mom. So that is kind of saying like not very, right? I thought their new house was gorgeous. I didn't think it was that nice. This is one of those kind of slangy ways that the word that gets used in English. So that's kind of a tricky one as well. It can also be used as a conjunction where you're kind of joining two different parts of a sentence together, right? Remember that a subordinate clause does not stand on its own, and it must be connected to a main or independent clause. This is where people get really confused. He always felt sorry that his mom was unable to see her grandchildren. What I see sometimes is people are used to seeing the word that at the beginning of a word. So they put a period here and they put a capital letter here. But that doesn't make sense because the whole second sentence is continuing the idea of the first sentence. It's still part of the same sentence. So just because it's the word that doesn't mean it has to have a capital letter, okay? It was so cold that the water in the toilet bowl froze. The trip was fine until we hit the tree that had fallen across the road. It's all part of one sentence. It's connecting two different smaller ideas together, okay? The other time you're going to see this is where that indirect quote, where they're using a reporting verb, said, told, admit, replied, explained, answered. You'll also see it for mental process verbs like believe, think, know, hope, felt, worried, dreamed, and they're using it instead of using quotation marks. The police said that there have been a lot of robberies recently. My dad told me that he always wanted to be a hockey player when he was little. She believes that if she just works hard enough, she will be successful. The principal hoped that the new playground equipment would help recess go more smoothly. And again, in that case, that is a connecting word. It has to stay there. You can't turn it into a capital letter, okay? We can also express opinions or feelings using an adjective plus a that clause. Usually when we do that, we have the verb to be in front of that adjective. As things like am, are, is, was, or were. Some common times where you might see this is things like sure, certain, right, important, afraid, pleased, sorry, surprised, or worried. Now, I know some of those are kind of like verbs, but in this case, they're being used like an adjective, okay? She is worried that she will fail the test. He is sure that he has gotten the job, right? If I just said he is sure, well, sure about what? She is worried about what? It's kind of answering the question, basically. Every now and again, you'll have a sentence like this where they drop the word that. Mom was surprised that dad came home early. Sometimes people will drop the word that and just say, Mom was surprised dad came home early. That's okay. It's still considered grammatically correct. It sometimes in some phrasing can sound a little bit confusing, that's all. And yeah, we can use it to express our opinions and feelings. Yeah, we've done that already. Sorry, I kind of taken that one off. It's also used to introduce a defining clause. Sorry, trying not to cough in your ear there, here. And the defining clause is where you're adding extra information that helps you understand what you're referring to. Like she picked up the hairbrush that she had left on the bed. Not any hairbrush, but specifically the one that was on the bed. He was the first director of the National Science Foundation, and he funded science research with an annual budget that grew to $500 million. Okay, we've got a few more slides, but we will cover those tomorrow. Again, if you have any questions, give me a phone call or shoot me a little email. I'd be happy to answer. And I hope you have a good evening.